reports that are circulating that there are grumblings in the military.
We are addressing it. Nakita namin sa isang malaking problema. Based on my experience also, 30 years na lang naghirapan, tapos magiging default lang sila because of yung delay ng delay of promotion and also delay of designation. Gravely affected the moral kasi nakita nila na mayroon pong makita po natin na ang affected is yung 1991, 92, 93, 94, hindi sila makaangat. Kasi yung nagkakaedad na sila, if we will pass this amendment, will solve the lingering both short-term and long-term effect of the law that we have passed previously.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
Defense Secretary Carlito Galvez says that there is no unrest in the armed forces, but he has confirmed that there are grumblings among military personnel.
Galvez says these are rooted from concerns over provisions of the law that mandates a fixed 3-year term for top officials. Here is what we know. Republic Act number 11709 is a law signed by former President Duterte last year, just over a month before his term ended. This act fixes the term of ranking military officials to 3 years as it aims to put a stop to the revolving door policy in the AFP. This refers to the appointing of top military officials to posts they would only hold for a short time. Galvez says that while they understand the good intentions of the law, it delays the promotion of military personnel. He says this delay prevents officials who had served for years from getting promoted before they hit the retirement age of 56. This, according to Galvez, has affected the morale of soldiers, especially those from the lower ranks.
These concerns came to light following the reappointment of AFP Chief of Staff Andres Centino, who will hit the retirement age of 56 next month. Centino's reappointment forced the unceremonious exit of his predecessor, Vicente Bacaro, who only served as AFP chief for 5 months and who was supposed to be the first beneficiary of RA 11709. The AFP is now recommending amendments to the law instead of a fixed term. Galvez says Congress should revise the tenure of AFP officials to maximum term. The DND proposes to keep the 3-year term for the AFP Chief of Staff, while the commanding generals of the Philippine Army and the Philippine Air Force, as well as the flag officer in command of the Philippine Navy, will each get 2-year terms. Same goes for the Vice Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, Unified Command Commanders, and Inspector General. The Senate says it is reviewing bills that will seek to amend RA 11709. Lawmakers hope to make amendments to the law before Congress adjourns in March.
Let's discuss this further with One News Defense Editor Manny Mogato. Welcome to the big story, Sir Manny.
Hi, good evening, Gretchen and Robbie.
Okay, first of all, siguro what would be the key difference between maximum term and fixed term, and is the request reasonable, the amendments?
The amendments are reasonable as long as there will be no extension of the officers beyond their mandatory age of retirement.
56.
56. Because in the past, especially during Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s tenure, many of the officers were extended. So, ang problema, naipit nga yung mga bata, kaya nagkaroon ng rumblings. No? But I also agree with General Galvez that Marcos now faces no threats from destabilization, although there are issues of morale. Number one, wala nang public clamor, no? Walang public support for a coup d'etat, unlike during Marcos' time, no? Number two, wala na yung mga sulsol sa military. No?
Walang instigador.
Walang instigador, oo. At number three, the military is now more professional.
Okay.
And they will follow Actually, the appointment of the Chief of Staff and the other senior officials are the prerogative of the President.
Sige, so it's not destabilization.
Not
but
destabilization.
it does have big implications for basically very important reform. Particularly, ayun nga, itong RA 11709 wants to change this, not really a policy, but this culture of a revolving door at the very top of the AFP. Tama ba ang pagkaintindi ko na basically what we're acknowledging here are junior officers or officers who can see their classes, coming up in the ranks, seeing that kung magkaroon ng fixed term of 3 years, essentially their batches might lose an opportunity.
Well, alam mo, yung 3-year term is not new. It was first implemented during Cory Aquino. And the first beneficiary is General De Villa. Because in 1988, all the members of PMA Class 1957 were retired en masse. And si De Villa lang naiwan. No? He was given a 3-year term. So he retired in 1991 after 3 years. Tapos si Cory pinagbigyan si Biason for 3 months. And then after that, inappoint si General Abadia also for 3 years. And Fidel Ramos respected that tenure because hindi niya pinilitan nung naupo siya. So he allowed General Abadia to retire in 1994. And in 1994, he was replaced by General Arturo Enrile. Si Arturo Enrile was extended by several months. Not because gusto ni Ramos, but because it was APEC. So tinapos yung APEC bago siya in-extend. So, yung 3-year term, hindi problema yan sa military. They will respect it. So, ang problema lang ngayon, kung nangyari kay Centino na binalik, kung ma-extend siya, let's say, another 1 year, dun makaka-problema.
Bakit? I mean, what is the
Ayaw kasi
resistance?
ayaw ng military ng extension, no? Si Romy Espino was served for 9 years under Marcos. He was replaced by General Ber, who served for 6 years. Lahat yun extended.
Pero ang layo na natin doon. In fact, yung sitwasyon natin kabaliktad.
Yung nga, pagka binalik mo si Centino at na-extend na naman si Centino, palagay ko magkakaroon ng discontent.
Okay.
Yeah. So yung seeds of discontent, babalik.
Okay.
Babalik po ako doon sa unang tanong. What would be the difference between maximum and fixed term?
Yung maximum bagong terminology yan na sinasabi ni General Galvez. Kasi yung fixed term, 3 years, di ba? Yung panahon ni Cory. Ngayon, yung sa RA 11709, 3 years. Ngayon, yung maximum na tenure, parang ginagaya nila sa US eh. Sa US kasi may ganun, may maximum tenure. Pero actually, hindi rin bago yan. Kasi may time engraved sa...
Ano ibig sabihin nun?
Pagka ikaw na-promote na 1-star general, 5 taon mo lang
Okay.
ang time engraved. Pag hindi ka na-promote to the next higher rank, tanggal ka na.
Okay, so tanong ulit ni Gretchen. Ano yung what defines maximum?
Kasi sabi nyo, hindi
Is it the retirable age?
Hindi nga malinaw sa proposal ni Galvez. Pero kasi may time engraved, hindi
sige.
lang actually sa officers yan eh.
Sige. So yun mga
Pati sa enlisted.
sige. Yung mga ganun, malilinawin pa. Hopefully, we have more time later on. We'll continue to discuss these things. Pero isa na lang basic tanong. Sinabi kasi ni former AFP Chief of Staff, Rodolfo Biazon, former Senator Biazon, na for him, punot dulo talaga yung 11709. Basically, one question for him. Yung nangyari lalo na kay Centino at kay Caro, ang tanong niya lang is, ini-implement na ba ang 11709? So, from all of this, clearly, hindi pa nai-implement.
Hindi pa nai-implement.
And then, katali niyan yung tanong ko, kung hindi pa nai-implement, may proposal na kaagad to amend the law na hindi pa nagkakaroon ng chance to even have an IRR and to be implemented. What does all of that mean in terms of the process? Gaano katagal pa before we even have that law finalized amended and then also...
Nung in-appoint si Gerald Bacaro, akala ko nagsimula na. Na-implement na yung law. Pero nung tinanggal si Bacaro, binigay si parang, teka muna, ano nangyari sa law? Tapos ganyan babaguhin nila. So, I think may politika dyan.
Do you think it's a matter of making the law better or is this a pushback to change? Kasi yun nga, tagal na rin po.
Pushback eh. Alagay ko, nakita nila na may problema pala. Hindi pala ganun kadali.
Everybody's now calculating what is the implication of this law on me in particular, not just the military establishment. O sige, Manny Mugato, maraming salamat. Asahan namin na tuloy mag-follow up tayo dito.
Sige, salamat po.
Okay. In the meantime, let's move on to other news. It is not just pork, onions, and corn that the country is heavily importing. Senators found out that around 93% of the country's supply of salt is also imported. Some government agencies say this is caused by the ASIN law, which mandates all locally produced salt to be iodized to address the problems of iodine deficiency. Senator Cynthia Villar says this law, which was passed in 1995, is preventing the development of the local salt industry. The Senate Committee on Agriculture is now pushing to amend the act. Now, as for sugar, the Sugar Regulatory Administration is calling for the sale of seized smuggled sugar through Kadiwa outlets to give consumers access to cheaper supply. SRA Administrator David Alba said he would recommend this move to President Marcos. The agency is also preparing for the importation of more than 450,000 metric tons of white sugar for the entire year in a bid to bring down commercial prices of the commodity. Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos is defending the Agriculture Department's decision to import onions. Marcos, who also stands as Agriculture Secretary, says government was forced to import onions due to supply problems that pushed prices to skyrocket. The president also acknowledged smuggling problems in the country and proposed digitalizing customs transactions to address the issue.
After the break, the Court of Tax Appeals has acquitted Nobel laureate Maria Ressa and Rappler Holdings of 4 counts of tax evasion. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
About 5,000 years ago, there was a lava explosion here in Iceland, and when volcanoes erupt and cool down, they leave behind lots and lots of basalt. So all this rock is predominantly basalt. That's pretty much what all of Iceland is made of. And basalt rock is really good at capturing carbon dioxide.
CarbFix imitates and accelerates these natural processes to permanently store carbon dioxide in basaltic rock. These futuristic pods is where it all happens.
So when you inject CO2 underground, you can actually now show us what exactly happens.
Yeah, this is actually a nice example of kind of before and after.
Yeah. Can I touch it?
Of course.
Now this is basalt, right?
Yes, it kind of looks like a sponge. And these pores and fractures and vesicles, they can actually host the CO2 once you've turned it into stone. And that's what you see here. In this rock, we have already stored some CO2. You can see all these white spots. So here, the pores are actually filled with these white minerals, and this is just simply CO2 turned to stone.
It's been a volatile start to the year for the pound, and investors are bracing for more turbulence. In 2022, the pound hit a record low against the dollar and delivered its worst annual performance in 6 years. This year, investors see very little room for recovery given the UK's various economic challenges. There's the Bank of England warning that a recession is all but inevitable, which would limit its ability to raise interest rates. Sterling is also being held back by a record decline in living standards, as well as a housing market that looks vulnerable.
watching The Big Story here on One News. Truth and justice win. That's what Rappler CEO Maria Ressa had to say after the Court of Tax Appeals acquitted her and the media company of tax-related charges. Here is what we know. The Appellate Court's First Division handed its decision earlier today, clearing Ressa and Rappler Holdings of tax violation charges, with the prosecution failing to prove their guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The court found Ressa and Rappler Holdings not guilty on 3 counts of failure to supply correct tax information and 1 count of tax evasion. But how exactly did this all start? Well, in 2015, Rappler began issuing Philippine Depositary Receipts, or PDRs, a financial instrument that allows foreigners to invest in a Philippine company without owning it. This prompted the government to look into Rappler's operations and tax liabilities. And by 2018, the Justice Department had already charged Rappler for tax evasion and failure to file tax returns. Motions for reconsideration filed by Rappler were dismissed, and the Court of Tax Appeals proceeded with the trial by 2019, with Ressa taking the stand as witness 2 years later.
Despite the acquittal, the legal battles continue for Ressa and Rappler. She is still facing a cyber libel conviction, while Rappler is still fighting a closure order for having allegedly violated a constitutional ban on foreign ownership in media. For now, Ressa welcomes the victory. She says all charges against her are baseless.
Politically motivated yung charges. We weren't the only news organization attacked. But we continue to have faith in our justice system, that the men and women who are there will stand up to political pressure.
The Philippines could see more of its nurses pack their bags for greener pastures abroad, but one group of nurses says, who could blame them? In our interview with Filipino Nurses United Vice President Eleanor Nolasco last night on The Chiefs, she said that even nursing students are being offered promising work opportunities abroad for quite some time now. Nolasco said that while foreign recruitment does not seem to violate any existing laws, it is seen as a threat to the country's health workforce. The Philippines currently has a shortfall of at least 100,000 nurses and is facing a shortage of other medical allied professionals. The government has set a deployment cap of 7,000 healthcare workers per year to address the shortage. Now, to discuss with us what's going on in our nursing programs, with us CHED Chairman Popoy De Vera. Good evening, Mr. De Vera.
Hi, good evening.
Sir, kahapon kausap nga namin ang Nurses Association, and it was reported that now some foreign missions are recruiting directly from inside the colleges and nursing schools. First, as they said, this is a concern, but one basic question, does that necessarily violate any rules? Is this something that CHED would find a concern?
No, it does not violate any law. The reality is higher education is internationalized all over the world now. And many countries, many foreign countries are relaxing their policies on education to attract foreign students and to attract foreign students who will work in their country afterwards. This is happening not just in nursing, this is happening across many fields. And you will be surprised, when you look at other countries that have relaxed their policies. So this is part of a global phenomenon that attracts Filipino students to study or continue their studies abroad and work abroad. So, for example, not just in nursing, you will be surprised. Centennial College in Ontario in Canada has more than 1,000 Filipino students enrolled in their 2-year programs. Why is that the case? Because in Canada, if you study for 2 years there, you're allowed to work for 3 years after that. And therefore, it is an attractive option for Filipinos to continue or to study there and work as a pathway to residency later on. What is interesting, for example, in Canada, is that students, while in the 2 years that they're studying, are allowed to work for a maximum of 40 hours a week. That is just like full-time enrollment already. So many young Filipinos are attracted there because they can study, they can work, and they can create pathways for practicing and earning a living abroad. So this is not just in nursing. This is a phenomenon happening across many fields right now.
Taking a look at the equation, certainly Filipinos, would win by going abroad. I mean, not just in terms of pay, but also in terms of living standard. But how do you think can this be fair to the Philippines? I mean, we're also facing a threat of losing healthcare professionals. This reminds me of athletes in the UAAP, for example. May kinuha kang atleta, college pa lang. Noon, naglagay sila na residency para to kind of discourage leaving and staying in the home university. I mean, do you think that kind of setup, do you see it happening, or are you totally supportive of what is happening right now?
Well, just like what is happening in sports, the answer is we have to replenish and make sure there's still a lot of good students, good nurses who will remain in the Philippines, even if many Filipinos seek greener pastures abroad. No? What the Commission has done last year is to lift the more than 10-year moratorium on the opening of new nursing programs by higher education institutions. Remember, we imposed a moratorium in 2011 because there were too many nursing graduates who could not find jobs. As many as 200,000 of them when CHED started closing schools that have very poor performance in licensure tests. And we have lifted that ban on new programs, and many schools are now applying to reopen or to open nursing programs. So this is a way of replenishing potential students and nurses who will go abroad. We just have to produce more locally so that there will still be Filipinos who will practice here in the Philippines.
Okay, maraming salamat po sa oras nyo. CHED Commissioner Popoy de Vera. After the break, President Bongbong Marcos presents his plan for the country's economic progress in Davos while prices of essential goods in the Philippines continue to rise. We will be discussing that with BPI economist Jun Neri when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Social media companies did make great strides in moderating content over the recent years. However, Sunday's events in Brasilia show they have a long way to go in languages other than English.
Much like the January 6th attack on the US Capitol, posts seen by Bloomberg News suggest participants were able to openly organize themselves on social media. We discovered posts on social media featuring apparent attendees at Sunday's attack using code words to discuss their routes to Brasilia as well as the kind of weapons they were planning to bring. The terms themselves were relatively simplistic, with phrases such as Selma's Party and Corn on the Cob used as standards for demonstration and people, respectively.
To many observers of the Brazilian government in recent years, it comes as no surprise that Bolsonaro's supporters have taken a page out of the MAGA playbook. Bolsonaro, like Trump, also attempted to discredit last year's election. And now, as the Brazilian government looks to bring those who participated in the attack to justice, his supporters are referring to the arrested as political prisoners and attempting to spread the claim that they were in fact infiltrated by members of radical leftist groups. What Sunday's events made clear is that the structural issues behind the way social networks handle misinformation are still very much there.
இதில் பிறந்திருக்கோம் அப்படின்னா பெருமாளுக்கு கைங்கரியம் பண்ணுறதுக்காகவே நம்ம பிறந்திருக்கோம். ஸோ அந்த இதில் வந்து அப்பா, தாத்தா, கொள்ளு தாத்தா இப்படி எல்லாருமே வந்து இந்த பெருமாளுடைய அலங்காரத்தை வந்து நம்ம பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தோம். ஸோ அவள் இதை பார்த்து அது மாதிரி நம்மளும் பண்ணணும் ஒரு ஆசையினால பெருமாளுக்கு அலங்காரம் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு, பெருமாளுக்கு மாத்திரம் இல்லாமல் எல்லா சுவாமிக்குமே அலங்காரம் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்ற ஒரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்டில் வந்து ஸோ அப்படியே நம்ம அலங்காரம் பண்ணணும். அலங்காரத்துக்கு வந்து ஆர்ட், ஓவியம், இன்னொன்று வந்து பரதநாட்டியம், இன்னும் வந்து யோகாசனம். இது மூணும் கலந்தது தான் நம்ம அலங்காரத்தில் வந்து பண்ண முடியும். அந்த முத்திரைகளும் சரி, அந்த பாவனைகளும் சரி, அந்த உட்கார்ந்த திருக்கோலங்கள் எல்லாமே. ஸோ இந்த இதை வந்து நம்ம என்ன பண்ணணும், இதில் என்ன நம்ம மேம்படுத்தி பண்ணணும் அப்படிங்கிறத நம்ம திங்க் பண்ண அடுத்தடுத்து இப்போ நம்ம பெருமாளுக்கு வந்து திருவடி சாத்திடுறோம் அப்படின்னா அடுத்தது ஹஸ்தத்தை நம்ம எப்படி சாத்தலாம், ஹஸ்தம் சாத்ததுக்கப்புறம் மார்புகள்லாம் நம்ம எப்படி சாத்தலாம், அப்புறம் கிரீடங்கள் எப்படி சாத்தலாம், கர்ணபத்திரம் காதுன்னு சொல்லி அது எப்படி சாத்தலாம், இப்படி நம்ம வந்து ஒன்று நம்ம அடுத்து
You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
President Bongbong Marcos showcased the state of the country's economy and plans for recovery during the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Here to give us his insights on the economic pronouncements made by President Marcos at the WEF, we have with us live via Zoom BPI lead economist Jun Neri. Good evening. Welcome to The Big Story, sir.
Good evening sa viewers nyo.
So sabi po ni Pangulong Marcos, 7% growth in the economy in 2023. What do you think?
Hindi naman imposible. I think it's achievable, but maraming headwinds na tinatawag or challenges, no? Kasi yung naging source ng growth natin last year or in 2022 was largely because of the reopening, no? So yung face-to-face classes, nagkaroon ng konting improvement sa turismo, no? So the question is this sustainable in 2023? And unfortunately, there are a lot of downside risks, including recession in Europe, possible recession in the US, and of course, China, whether it will be able to reopen completely or not. No? So, hindi naman imposible, pero parang mas maraming downside risks than upside risks. So baka growth natin would be around 6 or lower pa.
And you mentioned nga po all of those factors, which all of that being external, all of that also having direct impact on prices here at home. Inflation being very, very high among our concerns, and given that we are still a consumer-driven economy, what impact will that have on the growth prospects if we fail to tame inflation?
Actually, kahit hindi matame ang inflation, Robbie, yung impact nung pagtaas last year will still be felt this year, no? So tama ka, it's not just external factors that's slowing our economy this year. Consumers in particular, because they had to borrow a lot to compensate for higher prices kasi walang choice. Kailangan na bumalik sa eskwela ng mga bata, and to be able to cope, they have to borrow. So more and more of our countrymen are getting deeper into in debt and less savings in this environment. Mas mahihirapan tayo makakita ng mas mabilis na growth kung ganyan ang kalagayan ng mga kababayan natin.
Taking a look at the President's attendance to the World Economic Forum, what do you think should we expect out of it? I mean, I was reading an article a while ago about Elon Musk mocking those who attended the forum, saying that this is a group of elites who are out of touch with reality. Your take on that? How can we maximize that attendance for the benefit of our economy, and can we really materialize that based on the history?
Well, still, it's a chance for us to showcase the opportunities in our country. And of course, with the new administration, they would like to highlight some of the new programs that they would like to introduce, including the push for a wealth fund. No? So many of these tend to bear fruit too. But of course, it depends on how consistently we deliver on the domestic reforms. No? So no matter how optimistic you are about the opportunities here in our country and highlight some of the reforms that have been put in place, these have to come with other more crucial reforms, including yung sa food, no? Yung food supply, assuring energy security and keeping prices more stable.
Okay, you talked about wanting to showcase some things. Of course, we have to ask about the Maharlika Wealth Fund. What's the best case scenario? At the same time, on the other side of a best case scenario, what's important for the public to keep in check in terms of expectations for any impact of that fund?
Well, I'd really like to avoid talking about the nitty-gritties of that initiative because there is still no law guiding it. But clearly, there has to be a lot of ways to ensure that it's not abused. No? So, in the bank, for example, in BPI, we have ways of ensuring that the risks to the public and to the owners are guided well. No? So, hopefully, the guidelines and the standards are also quite high for the public sector. No? Managing a vast amount of resources.
Sige, maraming salamat po. BPI lead economist Jun Neri. And that is the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to One News PH for more analysis. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. Ako po si Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.